Okay, good morning. What to you? Um, so today we are gonna start with this workshop series that is the how to protect your crop. It's a common question always in every event where uh, always it's impossible, it's inevitable to have some questions about the plants. Always we want to grow some plants and in some point of the crop always comes fungus, insect, some disease, something, and there is a point when we don't know like what to do about this. And so well, I introduce myself first. So I'm Christian Acosta, agriculture educator in Cornell Cooperative Extension in Allegheny County. I'm agricultural scientist, and it's a pleasure for me just being sharing this kind of topics. This is one of my favorite topics about the plant protection and plant pathology. And so now let's start first with some a little game, yeah, it can be like a little game to see what do we know about this. So here I'm going to show you a couple of things and just think about what this can be. Is this a pest? Is this a disease? Can be another thing. So like this, for example, if we see a ladybug in our garden, so this can be a pest or a disease or any other thing.
Beneficial.
So it's beneficial. So in this case, it's not a pest, it's not creating a disease. So this is entomophagus. So every time we see something, a word like this, what it means. So entomo, it's everything related to insects, and phagus, so what this eats. So in this case, this one eats another insect. So this is actually good for our crops. And now we have some blackberries, and we see this gray, like looks like some cotton, something like this. So what this can be? So
Fungus. Or should I ask? Should I just say the wrong answer? It looks like it was snowing.
Pollen.
Pollen.
in this case, we have a fungal disease. So in this case, yeah, it's a disease. And now we have honeybees. We have maybe in some point we can see a lot of them in our garden. So some people are afraid of them, but how can they? What is their role in our plants, in our garden? They can be a good ones or a bad one.
Pollinators.
So yeah, this is an easy one because for especially these last years, everywhere we can see the importance of this. Like protect our bees. Like without bees, it's hard to get food. So what about this one? When we see like our plants, in this case our evergreens like this, and we see like brown spots. So what is the first thing that we can think about this?
Well, they only have like a 40-year lifespan, so it could just be natural aging. But I would say that's probably environmental, like maybe it's not growing right underground. So not necessarily a disease, but an environmental issue.
Yeah, so in this case, some people can think about like what it can be, some kind of insect that went into the tree. Or I had this question just recently about these kind of problems. So something typical, something common is a thing that is a fungus, or it's some kind of damage for herbicides or something like this, but this is just a frost damage, like in this case. So yeah, it can be by aging. Sometimes it's just normal that they start aging in this way, but in many other times this can happen, and it's about the frost damage. So in this case, is not a pest, but we can consider that it's a disease, and we will see why this is a disease, even when it's not a fungus, like in this case, or a pest related to this. So this is another one. It's a tricky one. So here we have two things in this picture. So we have like a larva, probably some kind of moth or butterfly, and something like looks like Q-tips or cotton, something over it. So what this can be a pest?
So you've got a beneficial insect laying its eggs on a pest. So when they hatch, and I know, Jeff, this is disgusting to you, they will consume the body of the host.
Yes. So
I usually see it as tomato hornworm, but that doesn't look like tomato hornworm.
Yeah. So in this case, yeah, it's a pest and parasitoids. So this is, we have both here. So we have a beneficial one and we have a pest at the same time. So just a fact that we used to see is many of those alien movies and these effects, like some organism going out of the body of someone and growing inside and all this. Many of these ideas comes from these natural relationships, natural things on the nature. So this is actually happening, but not because of alien. It's just the relation between pest and parasitoids. Now we have another one here, and it's this little green tiny insects that we have sometimes in our tomatoes, our beans, and many crops that we just see, and they can be a lot of them. They can be just this green color or even black ones.
It looks like aphids.
You think it's like a pest?
It's a pest, yes.
Yes.
Soft-bodied pest that can be eaten by its neighbor upstairs.
Yes, that's why.
Sorry, am I going too fast?
Yeah, that's why I put these two together. So it's normal to find these together in some crops, because this one loves to eat this one. So it's a good one. And what about when we find a big animal, not just an insect, just something small? If we find chipmunks, deers, even huge ones like bears. So can it be another thing, or can it be considered as pest, or even creating a disease?
I would say it's a pest, at least in my garden. It can also carry ticks, which would be a host for another pest, but not for plants, but for people. Yeah.
So we are talking about pest because, well, now we will see why. But even if it's a big one, usually we think about pest like something small, an insect or something small. But even the big ones, they are creating an issue. They are eating the plants, so they become a pest for our crops. Now we find something like this. This is like a coffee plant, and we see that they are turning yellow. And so sometimes we can think, oh, there is a fungus or there is something in there.
Virus.
So what can it be?
Looks nutritional, like a lack of nitrogen.
Exactly. Exactly. So sometimes this can be just a deficiency, but this is considered as a disease. Now, what about this? We have probably zucchini or cucumber, watermelon, some cantaloupe, and we see that leaves start becoming like this yellow and like some spots on this. So this is kind of tricky one because we can think it can be an insect, it can be a fungus, it can be, what can it be?
I'd say a disease. It does not look like powdery mildew, which usually comes at the end of the season. Can you flip the leaf over? Can I see the other side?
And this happens sometimes that we receive the emails and some pictures and we actually cannot like, oh, can you turn the leaf? So in this case, when we see something like this, we're checking closer the plant, we can realize that sometimes we have a lot of herbicide damage. So looks like some fungus, but we see the rest of the leaves like down here, and is just like some of them are damaged and some of them they are not. And the last one is a little challenging. So we have a crop, and this is like a lot of weeds. So the weeds, how we consider the weeds, pest, disease, or another thing?
It's a pest. It competes for nutrients and sunlight and space. I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
So it's a pest. Sometimes if we ask this, just people can think like, I don't know, it's another thing. We don't know because it's another plant. So how can it be a pest? So now let's see what is actually a pest, because we hear a lot of pest, disease, but what is a pest? So a pest is, well, before saying this, time ago, many people used to think that just a pest is an insect or some small or big animal, like usually just related by animals or insects. But actually the pest is just any organism that reduces the availability and the quality of human resources. Like in this case, it can be food like vegetables, fruits, or the ornamental plants. So our interest, our plants of interest. So it doesn't matter if it's a big organism like a bear, a deer, or chipmunks, or even small ones like insects, or even microorganisms like bacteria, virus, nematodes, anything that it's alive and it's affecting our crops. So this is a pest. So in this case, we can see like weeds, we can see some insects, and we can see some fungus. And disease, so same. Before we used to think that a disease is just related to fungus or nematodes or only microorganism, and there is something alive, even a tiny one that we cannot see just by eye, affecting our plants. And well, a disease, it can be just anything that affects our plants and prevent them to develop and grow healthy. So this can be abiotic or biotic ones. So usually it's related to the biotic ones, and that's what we think. Many people used to think when we mention disease on plants. And just like this example, just like this alternaria creating a disease in the tomato leaves. But like we were seeing here, so in these cases, this is the plant is sick. In this case, the plant has a disease here too. And this is by nutrients deficiency. And here it can be because some herbicide. So in this case, this is considered a disease too. And it's not only related to a microorganism. So now we have here what I have been mentioned. So abiotic ones that it can be that we are gonna see today, and the biotic ones that they are a little more complex. They take more time to explain, and there is a lot of them. So for today, we are starting with the abiotic factors, the risk, and how to start identifying the risk in our garden when we want to start a garden, when we want to start even a big crop. So the main parameters to monitor is one of the important one is the soil fertility. And this is something that mentioned the FAO, that is healthy soils are the basis for healthy food production. And sometimes just people, especially when it's just someone who wants to do this, just like a hobby or just a new person just trying to grow something, some food or something in the garden. So usually the concept is it's just soil, it's just dirt. So I just put the seeds in there and that's it. Well, the soil is not just dirt, it's a living soil, and there is a complete universe, a complete world down there where there is I can't say even millions and a lot of bacteria, nematodes, fungus, big organisms, and well, a lot of even animals living down there. And this is a very important one because we can have the best seedlings, the best variety, the best seeds, but if the soil is not a good one, is not the best, so we can have just the plants dying, and we can just keep asking like what is growing with the plants, why if it's the best materials and I brought the best for my garden, why it's not growing, why the plants are dying, or why they are so weak and easily get some disease. So something really important is the organic matter. That what is the organic matter is just like the product of on-site biological decomposition. We can have this soil, we can have the plants, we can have the seeds, but if we don't have bacteria, we don't have something in there that usually is the bacteria, the microorganism, just working there to transform these elements into a compound that the plant can take and keep growing. So if there is nothing in there, there is no way that the plant can just take random elements and keep growing. So this is why it's very important to keep alive our soil. And when the soil is alive and it's healthy, so we have healthy plants. Another parameter that we have to just take in mind is the pH. So there is not exactly a pH of soil. For some people who is starting this, what is the pH? And this is just how acid or how acidic or basic is my soil. So there is not a perfect pH because every crop has a different requirements for pH, for organic matter, for nutrients, for everything. So in this case, the basic one is the pH between 5 and 7 is usually for most of the crops, but in some cases we can have crops that they grow better in very acid soils or basic soils. And well, we can have even organic matter, a good pH, and we can have the bacteria and everything in there. But sometimes it's too hard or too soft, and there is something happening, and the plant is still like weak or not growing well. So this is related to the soil structure. The soil structure is just what is the percentage of sand, silt, and clay. So there is not a bad soil or a good soil. It depends what do we need? What do we want to grow in our garden? So it's not the same to grow rice in a soil that has high percentage of sand, for example, because rice it needs more water, and it's not the same growing flowers or corn or some beans in a soil that has high percentage of clay. So it depends, what do we need? So always the ideal thing to do here is just to take a sample of our soil and send to the laboratory and make a soil analysis. But even before doing this and taking these parameters to the laboratory and to do all this, the plants can talk to us. And I say talk because it's just some signs, some symptoms about something is happening and something is growing and something is happening with the soil. So when they start growing, it so like I we see here before, and well, in the example here, like this deficiency. So this is the way that the plant just try to express, and in a way that the plant can talk or tell us that something is not that something is happening and is not the ideal environment or the ideal conditions of the soil. So have you seen something like this in your plants in some point when you want to grow something? So some kind of colors or shapes, different shapes and colors, and the plant start just growing in a different way that we want. So
How do you tell if it's just like a variegated leaf or if there's a nutrient deficiency?
So in this case, when it's a deficiency, well, sometimes can be tricky for example, virus. Some virus, they start producing some of these signs, like for example, a lack of potassium. And but we start just realizing just in the crop if it's just some spots, some plants just here, if it's just a spot or if it's just in general. So we start seeing just that all the plants start taking these symptoms, these signs. Sometimes the plants just they keep growing and they don't show like any other symptom or any other sign. So in this way, we have to be like very attentive, because usually when it's a microorganism, some disease created by a fungus, bacteria, nematode, that comes more symptoms and signs. So something always is happening on the roots or on the leaves, and usually it starts by some spots and start like spraying. And with the time, over the time, you see just how this start spraying. When it's this deficiency, so you see that just it's in general. So it's not starting growing like spraying something. So it's just in general, we can see that, oh, the plants. And something that can happen too when it's a big crop is that we can have different soil, different conditions of soil in even in the same farm, but a spot here that is rich in organic matter and rich in it's perfect, it's ideal. And another part just not far, just close, can be totally different, but we see just the spots. So when we see like the new leaves becoming like just become curled and pale, usually it's calcium. So the plant is telling us that there is not enough calcium, or something is happening that the calcium is not available for the plant to take the plants. Because another question is, well, I put fertilizer and I bought a bunch of things from the store and I put it in there, but there is nothing happening and the plant is still yellow and it's still showing that it lacks of iron or nitrogen, or the plant is just not taking. So we need to check like what is the composition of the products if we are getting some products, because like I said before, the elements, the chemical elements can be there, but if they are not in a way that the plant can take it, in a perfect chemical compound that the plant can take it, so the plant is just not gonna take it, and it will show you that it needs something to make this compound available for the plant. So when we see this, the new ones, the new leaves, and they are yellow, so usually it's iron related, so it needs iron. So before we see that, oh, but the coffee leaves in the example, they are yellow too, and you say that it's nitrogen. So how to now it's confusing. Now why both are yellow, but you're saying here iron, and before you said nitrogen. So in this case, we are talking about the new leaves. So the new leaves start becoming yellow. With the nitrogen, usually is the old leaves, and we will see another little different here and difference. And well, let's go going down. So when it's magnesium, it's this kind of leaves that we see that they are almost white. They start like with this green, like creamy color, green, almost white leaves, and sometimes they just falls off of the plant. And so in this case, there is magnesium. We need to apply magnesium. When it's potassium, the leaves are thinner than normal, and it has like some little holes in just over the leaf. And now let's make clear about the nitrogen. Another thing that we can make the difference between iron and nitrogen is because the nitrogen is the old leaves start becoming yellow, and they start by the tip of the leaf, and it starts like from the tip to the rest of the leaf. The phosphorus, it's similar now to the nitrogen, but the difference in this case is that the leaves this deficiency destroys the leaf quickly, and that can show some dead spots, like we can see here in this example. So it starts becoming yellow from the tip to the rest of the leaf, same like nitrogen, but now we have some dead spots, and it's faster than the nitrogen. And then we see the sulfur, for example, is this kind of plants that they just barely keep growing. Usually they are small, they are weak, they are yellow, they are not growing well. So this is just an example, just generally, because there is more to see for each one of the deficiencies. So this can be a topic for another session, another event. But generally, if we see something like this, so the plant has a disease, but in this case, it's not for a microorganism, it's just for the nutrients on the ground, on the soil. The second important factor to see is the water. So before start talking about the water, is there some questions that you have about what we just see about the soil, just the first part, the soil, before or after start planting?
Okay, so if I have a hanging basket that I had a plant in, and the plant died at the end of the year, and I kept the basket with the soil in it, can I replant something in that? Just keep using that soil over and over again?
Well, something that we need to check. So even for something that small, that is just the soil from a pot. So even if it just once a year or once every other time, it's a recommendation is take a sample and make even the basic one, the pH test or some kind of test, so we know what is happening in there. Something that we will see in the next session is about the crop rotation. So if we keep planting the same kind of plants in the same soil, so in some point we need to be applying more fertilizer, we need to be working more on that soil, and this soil can be more susceptible to develop some kind of microorganism or something that can become resistant and stronger over the time, affecting this plant. But this is something that we're going to mention in the second session next Friday. So yeah, we can keep using it, but we have to be attentive that if there is, if our plant died because of fungus, so the plant started showing like some signs about fungus, the root, they were just covered over like something that looks like cotton or something like this. We see that there is a disease and the plant just died. Sometimes we used to think like, oh, if I wait a month, 2 months, or just a period of time, and then put again a plant in there, so all these bacteria, all these diseases, they are just gonna die. But there are some bacteria, fungus, virus that they can be there for even years and even sometimes decades. They can be just there on the ground, and when the conditions, the environment and everything is just perfect for them, they just like awake again, they develop again, and they can continue affecting the plants. So this is why the rotation can be something good, and treating, even if we can make a treatment for that soil before starting planting again.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you've mentioned a couple times that we need to test the soil, even if it's just a pH test, or if we were to look at the slide before where we're trying to figure out if there's some sort of a nutrient deficiency, where do we go and how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah, usually in like around every city, every part, wherever we go, we can find the laboratories that they can test about everything. So we can find laboratories testing water, testing the soil. But for example, for us in Allegheny County, we can receive this if in some point you need for a crop or your garden or whatever you need. You can take a sample of your soil, even if you need some assistance, like how to take the sample, how to collect the soil if it's a big area, for example. So you can just call or email to the CC, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, and we can assist you with this soil analysis. We can do, for example, pH testing just there in the office, and it's a simple procedure. Or we can just send the sample to the laboratory. So this is something that can help. And if this is from another area and we are not close to help, so just look for a soil laboratory. And they are always just general, is because every laboratory has their own requirements, like how to collect the sample, how the sample has to be, the humidity on the sample, etc. But generally is about taking like a sandwich bag of the sample and just taking like a label and just filling out a form that the laboratory is providing and sending the sample. After a couple days, sometimes it can take weeks, it depends the laboratory, you receive the result, and in this way you can start checking like what do you need to work on the soil, if you need to increase or reduce the pH, if you need to work on organic matter, on the level of phosphorus, nitrogen, well, everything, it's gonna be there.
How much does it cost if we did it through CCE?
Usually it's around, well, for example, just a pH test is $3. If it's another one, like a complete one, it can be up to $20. So every laboratory has their fees, and it depends if it's just for a crop outside, if it's under a greenhouse, if it's just a sample for gardening. So every kind of test is different. It depends like what is the purpose of the, like why do you want to test your soil.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so now very important, another important factor to be monitoring is the water. So this is something that the water, it's fundamental in every plant, even for us as animals, it's very important. So the high or low moisture, always this may be a limiting factor for the plant disease. So it's something so simple that just with the water management, just with water, we can prevent or even just open the door for microorganisms and diseases in the crop. So something to consider about, to have in consideration about the water is, for example, the structure of soil. I mentioned this before, like here we can see a crop that it's just full of water. So if you see a rice crop, for example, it's a lot of water. So we need to keep the water in there. So we need soil with high levels of clay, for example. But if we want to grow even ornamentals, an orchid, we cannot put an orchid, for example, just in soil, and even if it has high percentage of clay. So this is why we are not just giving exactly some parameters for all the crops, because each plant has different requirements. So the structure of the soil can help us or can even increase the risk about diseases, about something. And this is something that happened when I was working with oil palm trees. Just in that area, it was just high levels of clay. And for the, well, it was some areas with sand, but it's good for the crop. But in another areas, it was just high levels of clay. And in these areas, just a simple rain, it was enough to keep a lot of water around the palm trees. And just in matter of 1 to 3 weeks, one of the disease started to create an issue in the crop, and palm trees from 7 years old, they started dying just in 2 or 3 weeks. So this is why the water is very important to keep in mind about what do we need. So if we want to grow tomatoes, if we want to grow any kind of plant, so what is the perfect soil and what is the water requirement for this crop? So in this way, we know if we are good and we can just water every day, for example, or if we need to do it every week. So in this case, this helps to set a plan about how I'm going to water the plants in a way that is good for me and not good for me and for the plant, and not good for the virus or the bacteria and the microorganism to develop a disease. Another important thing to consider is the irrigation system. So time ago, even down there from Colombia, where I come from, something common, it was like to have a good development of the crop, you just need to set an irrigation system where you literally is like putting a shower over the plants. And in that way, you make sure that the plants were okay, they had enough water. But this actually brought a lot of problems about fungus, specifically fungus. So in this case, we need to see what is the way that we are gonna be watering our plants. We can just read. So the recommendation always is read about what you want to grow. You want to grow tomatoes, read about the tomatoes, about what it needs, about the water, about the soil, about everything, because all this just can, we can just make the right actions. And in this way, just doing this, we can avoid diseases, we can avoid some kind of problems, and we can even increase our production, our yield. So this is related to the next one that I'm gonna tell, and it's the water drop size. So this is a interesting research project that I saw a couple years ago, and it was about how the water drop size that has a relationship with the the susceptibility of the plant to get a fungus or bacteria or some microorganism infections, because sometimes just the drop size, the water drop size, can just damage the plant, can even break the leaves, and that is just like literally like opening the door for bacteria and fungus and microorganisms that they cannot affect the plant, but once the plant is broken, it's open. So in that moment, yeah, they can just go into the plant and start creating a disease. So sometimes it's not just the presence of the microorganism in the crop, is just when something happens, and even just doing something so simple like and necessary like watering the plants, we can just be the ones creating this new problem. And another thing that is a common question is about the time to water the plants. So for example, in my case, since I was a child, my grandma, that she had a huge garden, she used to tell me never water the plants when it's hot, when it's sunny, and just water the plants when it's early morning or after, in the afternoon, after the sunset. So do you think that this is what do you think? This is correct or not? When is the perfect time to water the plants?
What I learned is that you should not allow the leaves to stay wet for a longer period of time than it would allow for a disease to form. So let's say it's 8 hours. You'd want, if you're going to be getting the leaves wet from watering, you'd want to do it at night when there's dew on them or something, so you wouldn't be extending that time of leaf wetness.
Okay.
I learned that too. I also heard that I agree with everything you just said. I also heard that if you were to water in sunlight, that you run the risk of like burning the surface of what it is that you're watering. And if you water in the middle of the night, that you have more of a chance for fungus to grow, because I don't know why.
Yeah, it's these kind of things that we don't know. Like we don't know why. Like my grandma used to say, like, I don't know why, but it's like this. So in this case, the question is, so the plants, they need water more at night or in the day when it's sunny and it's hot. So now let's ask about ourselves. So you used to feel thirsty and used to feel like drinking more water and thirsty during the day or at night. So an answer that I just remember, an answer that I heard once. It was like, well, it depends. If it's a Friday or Saturday night, I can be drinking more at night. So it just in a normal way is that we used to drink more and feel thirsty in the day, especially when it's sunny and it's hot. So this happens to the plants too. So because of this word that we see here, and it's the evapotranspiration. So the plants, they need water too in the day, but so the ideal thing is just to provide this water, but like you were saying before, just not over the leaves, because this can be the perfect environment for fungus to grow, and this can create the magnifying glass effect and burn the especially very sensitive tissues in some plants. Some plants, they just can tolerate that and there is no problem about that. But many other plants, they can just suffer when this happens. So now talking about the irrigation system, for example, if we have just drops, just an irrigation system where we are just keeping the soil just by drops of water, and the rest of the plant is dry, so it's perfect. The plants are taking the water, but there is not this risk about burning the leaves or even creating the perfect environment for microorganisms to go into the plant. So okay. So now an important thing that we cannot control is the weather. So we cannot control rains and things like this. But something that we definitely can control is about the times, about when are we going to start planting, what area am I living? Because sometimes, and I have seen just in my experience, people who wants to grow coconut trees in an environment like this, for example, like in New York State. So of course, this is not going to happen. So we are not getting coconuts, same like in another areas, or even bringing seeds from another countries or another areas. And even that can increase the risk of being bringing diseases and new diseases to this area. So every pest disease, each one of these one has its own and specific weather conditions. So in the next session, I will show you something about, it has to be like a triangle that we call the triangle of the disease, that with the perfect environment and the perfect conditions is just like you can almost make sure that a disease is going to happen when this is in like everything at the same time. So in this case, if we know that some pests can be, that we have the risk about our corn crop, and we have some pests around, or the pest can be developed in these temperatures with this quantity of water, the precipitation and everything. So we need to be attentive to this. And if we can prevent just planting something that can be more tolerant to the weather conditions, so we are avoiding these kind of problems later, and same time we are saving money. Because when the problems comes, when there is a disease, when there is something like this, we start just trying to see something like how to fix the problem and spending more in products and sometimes just in the seeds that we can maybe pick a kind of variety or some plant that is not good to grow in this area, and just losing the money, the time, the effort of trying to grow this kind of crop, this kind of plant. So just paying attention to this, the weather, what is the weather, the perfect, the ideal weather conditions for our crop, and same time the weather for the diseases fungus, bacteria, nematodes, everything about the like the natural enemy of the plant, and check the forecast and check the condition of the plant. So sometimes, like even just yesterday, we hear about someone that wanted to grow a cabbage and Brussels sprouts under a greenhouse and starting late. So starting like now to grow this one and under a greenhouse. So this is something that the plant maybe can try to grow, but is not gonna, this is not the perfect condition, the perfect environment, the perfect weather for this kind of crops. So just checking the forecast, this can be a huge difference, that can make a huge difference to set a plan and to have something growing in our garden, in our crops, and not only growing, so just growing successfully. And just the recommendation is read about pathogens, and because sometimes we can just learn about how to grow the plant, about the soil, the water, the fertilization, about pollinators, about like the good part of the crop. Well, we don't read too much about what can be associated with this crop, and sometimes some crops, it depends the variety. So if you have this variety of seeds, what can be affecting this variety? So how do we know this? Just reading specifically about this variety, this crop, and in this way we can be prepared. If in case something happens, we are ready for this, and we can start protecting our crop just by having the knowledge about all these kind of things.
I think you and I had a discussion about this at lunch yesterday, when a coworker was wondering why her spinach and broccoli wasn't growing well. And
Yes.
we had to point out that it was a cool season crop and that this isn't the best time to be starting those, but she either should have started them a month or so earlier, or start them again in the fall.
Yes, and plus growing like with this in this hot time of the year and under greenhouse condition. So now, before just talk about this this part, the chemical risk. So there are some questions about what we have been seeing about weather, about water, the management of the water or weather condition. There's some question about this.
I might be putting you on the spot, but I'm probably not putting you on the spot, Laura. Do people ask about whether or not you guys trust the Farmer's Almanac, and whether we can consider that a trusty source when making predictions for the year?
That's a weird question, and I have no answer for that. I don't know if Christian has a better one. I would say the Farmer's Almanac has a lot of historical data that it pulls on to make very good educated guesses. I don't know how they can say, the 4th of July is going to be, clear and sunny this year or something, or it's going to be a tough winter. I'm sure that there are weather systems and a lot of other smart people that go into the creating of that document. It has got a lot of good information in there.
Yeah,
I was curious. I've never actually cracked the Farmer's Almanac open.
It has a good website too, if you ever
does.
want
this is
to
it.
check it out.
So this is a really a good question, because this is something that is not that common. Not everybody just takes in account this information that is very important too. And it was working so good, so well, until a couple years ago, because now we have a challenge, and it's the climate change. And before times ago, decades ago, it was easy, or not that easy, but at least a little more easier to guess, to just trust in the forecast, in this calendar. And And yeah, this is not even only here in the US. And down there in Colombia, we have the same too. Even for some population, they take in mind to avoid the moon phases to plant, to be pruning, to be doing some activities. But now with this period of times with the climate change and with a lot of changes happening just every with the past of the time. So now we can have like, oh, the environment just probably is gonna be hotter this year and it's gonna be dry. And in some point it started raining and it's even raining a lot. So we were not ready, we were not prepared for something like this. And this is something that it's actually happening. So uh, we can just try to read and okay, like we can be setting a plan, but always is good, especially in these times and probably in the future, if we just keep going in the same direction about just the planet and about everything, it can be even worse. Just having a plan B, a plan B, C, D, just in case something can happen. So always is, yeah, important to check the forecast, check the calendars, check everything and set a plan, but have multiple plans in case something happens and the predictions are not right in some part of the year. More questions?
I use it's not really drip tape like you'd see in a traditional agricultural setup for vegetables, but it's like the homeowner's version of a drip hose that has, perforations in it to allow water at the root system. Is that a good system for a homeowner to use, or is there something better that you might suggest for irrigation?
Always we can find just commercially, we can find a lot of products, and always we have see always is coming something new, especially about everything. Even in the agriculture, we can see new things. But if we even with on a budget, which just doing by hand, this is something that even I was doing for a long time. Creating something like this, just like for example, a house and putting some holes on this and just put it on the ground and just see how this works. So in this case, we just tried, like, why not? So we just try. And if this is working, it's not creating like some spots that what we call in plant pathology, like hot spots for bacteria or fungus. If we and we can easily identify this because if in some point, for example, in some of the some part of the house, there is like a little water just being there, standing by there, and the plants around this spot start being sick. They start developing some fungus, some disease. So we can check and see, well, this is not good for me in this part. So we can try something different. The recommendation always is reading about the crop. This is about, in this case, about the irrigation system, because some plants, they need, just for example, orchids. So they don't need a lot of water, but in some point they need water in the environment, like just spraying some water over the flowers, the leaves, and just not 100% of the time just on the substrate. Same time for same thing for just multiple crops. So each one has different requirements. So if it's just something on that we can do by ourselves, even on YouTube, we can find a lot of ideas that using bottles or using these, well, I don't remember the name of these bags that they use in the hospitals to canalize, and using these ones just to be like an irrigation system for the plants. So we just try, and if it's working, okay, why not? So we see, we just have to be attentive to what is the reaction of the plant, if it's something happening in there or if it's working good for us. And especially when we don't have like a lot of money to be spending on our garden. So if we can save some money even doing something by ourselves, so why not? And now we have the last part of this first session, that is the chemical risk. So sometimes we can have the perfect seeds, perfect seedlings, the perfect soil. We can have the living soil. We can have everything just perfect, healthy, and we are almost sure that everything is going to be successful. But we just transplant the seedlings, for example, or we just put the seeds in there and the plant can start growing, but in some point die, or something is happening and we are like, what is happening? There is no fungus, there is no even sometimes like an extra step. I'm applying biological products to protect the plant, and the plant is still like, and there is a disease, it is still bad and it even dies. Sorry. So something that this can happen, and even just like a month, 3 weeks ago, we had a problem that it was a lot of people just trying to guess what is happening, because in a greenhouse that they were planting for years, in this year, in some point, with the same conditions, same everything, the plants, some petunias and another plant, they started just dying and becoming yellow, curly, and dying. They were testing water, testing soil, testing like everything around, and it was not bacteria, not fungus. The root system was okay. It was not anything for microorganisms. So they were just overwhelmed because all the plants dying, the production was going down, and what was happening. So at the end, it looks like everything that they were doing was right and it was good, but probably the water or probably just the air, somehow some parts, some chemicals, some herbicide, it was affecting the plants. So sometimes we can just receive or going to buy some substrate or some soil from another farm or another area, and just make our bed to raise veggies, for example, some vegetables, and these start happening. So in this case, we don't know, we cannot see actually that the soil or their substrate can be contaminated by herbicides. And some herbicides, it depends what kind of herbicides they applied before. It can be there for a long time, and that can keeps killing the plants. And so this is why the recommendation is just get the substrate, get the soil from a reliable source. So if it's a substrate that you can just take from a store that is certified, and you have like this, you can trust about that you have a good substrate. If it's from another farm, so it's reliable. What they were growing in there, are they applying herbicides? So it's something that we need to ask before just getting some substrate or soil and trying to grow our plants. Another risk that we need to have keep in mind is the traces of herbicides. So this can be just in the air, soil, or water. Some of the common ones is by air and by water. So I have seen multiple cases like this where a crop down here, so it's usually like when it's some mountain, for example, and the crop here is having problems. The plants are becoming yellow, are dying, and they don't know why. And just another farm here, they were applying some herbicides because they are planting again, they were trying to kill some weeds, or for some reason they were spraying herbicides, and these particles can go by air or in the water, and that can be contaminating another crop and killing another plants, another production. This can happen too when, and it's something that happens too when, for example, there is a crop here and the other farm, the neighbor, has bees, and the bees start dying, and it's because in the crop they were spraying insecticides, and then those chemical particles go through the air, and that goes and start killing the bees. So this is something that we need to pay attention about, what is around us. If there is another farm, if there is a neighbor that is growing something, what they are growing, if they are spraying, so we can see if our plants start being yellow or having some symptoms or signs to be to have a disease, that they are intoxicated in somehow or some way, like what is around us. So this can be something important. And if we are applying, if it's just by ourselves applying herbicides after finishing just a crop, for example, so just spray it before starting the new crop. So always read the label. And this is, you will hear this everywhere, and it's always read the labels, because each product is different, and sometimes the traces of the herbicide, they can last for more time. So something that we need to ask to ourselves, and especially about the product, is how long this chemical is active in the soil or in the plants. So in this way, we can avoid this chemical risk. And the last part of this chemical risk is just the analysis of existing plants before we start planting, before we start in our garden, before, like you said about the pots, what was there before, or what is in there right now. So if there is some plants, if they look like this, for example, for example, is this bed, and I'm growing something here, so it looks healthy, or if it looks something like this, just like a bush, just yellow, like something was happening there. And if it's, for example, we are going to a new land, or we are getting a new soil, or something that is new, we don't know what was in there before, so just ask about what was there before. So what crops have been grown there, what was the reason to just finish the crop, what kind of problems did they have with the crop. Around us, are there some farms, what they grow, what they spray, what they do, if they do, for example, organic crops. So we can be like, okay, we can trust a little bit more. But if they have just a traditional crop, so we need to, in some point, be attentive. Just, for example, the herbicides, if they are applying something, so we just try to cover or protect our plants. Same with the soil. It looks healthy, it looks like something is growing in there. Sometimes we just take the soil, and there is a lot of little animals and insects just going in there. So are these little insects that they can be a new pest for our plants? Because remember that not the fact that an insect is in the ground, it doesn't mean that it's a bad one. And same with the fungus, the bacteria, with everything. We have a huge diversity of organisms and microorganisms there, but it doesn't mean that all of them are bad, and even we need a lot of them. So just pay attention about the what is around us, about the soil, about these abiotic factors, and just in this way we can start preventing diseases. We can start protecting our crops. So just doing something like this, a simple research. So having a plan, setting a plan before start planting, and doing these simple steps, we can just avoid a lot and even expensive problems, expensive issues with pests, with diseases and things later. So this is the last part of our first session. If there is some questions so far, so what questions do we have so far just with this first part?
Not a question, but a thought that I know a lot of people keep a garden journal that can help them remember year to year, even, drawing little maps in it so they remember what was planted where, or like you had mentioned, what the condition with, let's say they bought transplants from a store and it was at the end and maybe they were on sale and it didn't look the greatest. Just reminding themselves each year what they had, how the plants looked, so that, even a month down the road, if something starts looking less healthy, they have a reference point. Do you have a suggestion? And maybe this is not the right class to ask it, but how do you save seeds year to year? I often have a seed package that I haven't finished up all the way. I put it in like a Ziploc baggie, and I put it in the crisper drawer of my fridge. I was wondering if you had other suggestions for how to save seeds.
Yes. So yeah, it's something totally normal that we are not planting all of our seeds. So we buy even the small packages, but we don't plant all of them. So this is not just there is not a correct just one answer to this, because some seeds, they can be viable. Well, sorry, I forgot this word. They can be viable for a long time. For example, just a lettuce. You can save lettuce seeds for 5 years, but an onion can be just for 1 or 2 years. So this is why it's another of our events that we had. It was just making a seed germination test before planting, and about saving the seeds. We can save in some container that is not just preventing from humidity of the environment. We can add even the powder, the milk powder. This helps to keep them dry.
Milk powder?
Yeah, just
like dried milk.
Dried milk. Yeah,
really,
this kind. Yeah. So the only thing with this is just preventing just the storage because it is sweet, so that can attract some ants or some kind of insects. But so this is just everything, because just this can help to keep the seeds dry. And for seed germination, so we have in our website. So this is our website, just allegheny.ccecornell.edu. In our gardening section, so we have an article about this. So we have here plant propagation, and we can see this seed germination test. So this is something that saves time when we want to use our old seeds, just to check if they are still good, if we can use them, or we need to buy new ones, or just put in more seeds on the ground. So in this way, we can have the germination percentage. So we always can keep our seeds. Recommendation always is about the hybrid seeds, because the hybrids usually the recommendation is just not save the seed. In some cases,
I don't see the article that you were referring to. Did you want that to be popping up on the screen?
Oh,
sorry, I didn't mean to throw a monkey wrench into your.
Can you see this one?
I see your slides.
Well, thank you. See here.
It's good you have a forgiving audience today.
Okay,
Perfect.
this one.
Excellent.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. So this is now our Cornell Cooperative Extension website. So in the gardening section, down here to the left, we see plant propagation. And we can see this easy germination test. This one, and here is this formula. We can, so with this we can know what is the percentage of germination, and it's a simple test, like you say, just well, for the germination test, not for storage. About putting in a sandwich bag with a paper towel, and so in this way we can know how are our old seeds.
Excellent. Thank you.
So is the crisper drawer a good place to put seeds, or do they just need to be kept room temperature and dark?
There, well, yeah, you can storage on just in some cabinet or some area where it is dark. Because, well, this is not, again, there is not only one answer about this. Some seeds, they can be just under the light or in dark, and nothing. There is like they don't mind that. And some seeds can be susceptible to the light. So yeah, just like general recommendation, just in a dark place, just keeping that far from insects. Sometimes even on the fridge they can be storage if it's not the freezer, because we don't want to just avoid like killing the embryo. And so yeah, even sometimes on the fridge, but not the freezer. So that's like general recommendation about the seed storage. Well, more questions?
Yeah, I had a question because you just said not the freezer, but didn't someone in one of your classes just mention that they put seeds in the freezer because of the hard coating around seeds, and
yeah,
that helps to
yeah. So this is another topic, that is the stratification is the word for this. This doesn't work for example, we are talking about vegetables. This is just for some seeds, especially about some trees, that they need like the winter time. So they need a freezing temperature. They need very low temperatures to like awake from the dormants and to start developing. So that's why sometimes people, for example, they eat an apple or they have some seeds of apples and they plant in the ground and they never grow. They just, because they need first these cold and temperatures. For example, down there in Colombia, we don't have a winter and we produce some variety of apples. So in that case, they applied a chemical that feel the plant like freezing, like cold, and in this way that like makes the plant start producing and keep growing like this winter. But in this case, it's like a chemical winter for these plants. So for this kind of plants, they need the stratification is the word, and something that we can like for this seed germination test. We need, before starting this seed germination test, just putting the seeds on the freezer.
I never really thought about the fact that for trees that you wouldn't have the freeze thaw to get seeds going down in Colombia. That didn't dawn on me. So I know that you've mentioned that previously, obviously, that your climate was different, but I hadn't thought about that specific role in germination not existing down your way. So interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, for they produce apples and pear. So for these two crops, when there is no season, so yeah, they spray the chemicals, and in this way they create like the winter condition. Like, so, well, this is our first session. Thank you very much for being here. And the next session, it's gonna be the crop rotation as a powerful tool in crop protection, like I mentioned before, and the irrigation system optimization. So that was one of the questions here, like if this is works for me, this is work, how can I use it to our favor the water in the crops. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I will see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks.